Imagine this. October 1916. The Battle of the Somme has already swallowed hundreds of thousands of men. Mud, blood, and endless rain have turned the fields of northern France into a graveyard that never stops growing. But on one small, forgotten rise called Hill 204, something far worse than German machine guns waited in the dark. It didn't kill with bullets. It didn't kill with gas. It simply replaced the men who stood watch. And the French soldiers who held that hill learned the hardest truth of the entire war. Sometimes the thing wearing your comrade's uniform isn't your comrade anymore. My name is Marie Leclerc. I'm 68 years old now, living quietly in Amiens. For most of my life, I believed my grandfather was just another silent veteran of the Great War. Like so many others, he rarely spoke of 1916. He worked, he ate, he slept, and sometimes at night I would hear him whispering names of men who were never found. When he died in 1962, he left me a single sealed envelope. Inside were 19 pages torn from an old regimental logbook and a small brass compass whose needle has never pointed north again. This is his story. This is what really happened on Hill 204. My grandfather, Sergeant Paul Leclerc, belonged to the 22nd Colonial Infantry Regiment. By late September 1916, the regiment had been bled white in the fighting around Guillemot and Ginchy. What remained of his company, barely 58 men, was sent to reinforce a forward position on Hill 204, a low chalk ridge that overlooked a stretch of no man's land roughly 120 meters from the German lines. The men called it the quiet sector, not because the war had spared it, but because for weeks the artillery had fallen strangely silent there. No big barrages, no raiding parties, just silence. When grandfather arrived on the night of September 28th, the first thing he noticed was the smell. Not the usual stench of latrines, rotting corpses, and chloride of lime. Something older, something damp and chalky, like wet stone that had never seen sunlight. The corporal in charge of the section was a man named Moreau, a tough Breton who had been in the trenches since 1914. He looked at the new arrivals with tired, sunken eyes and gave them 3 simple rules before they even put down their packs. First, he said, voice low, never shine a light after 2100 hours, not even a match, not even for a cigarette. Second, if you hear a voice calling your name from the wire, do not answer, do not look. Keep your eyes on the sandbags in front of you. And third, every single dawn, before stand to, you count the boots left on the duckboards, every pair. Write the number down. If the count is wrong, report it to me immediately. One of the replacements laughed nervously. Count the boots? What kind of joke is that? Moreau didn't smile. It's not a joke, son. It's how we know who's still real. For the first few nights, things seemed almost ordinary as the Somme could ever be. Shelling in the distance, rats the size of small dogs, the endless work of bailing water and shoring up collapsing trench walls. But on the night of October 3rd, the rules began to make terrible sense. Private Duval was on sentry duty in the forward sap, a quiet man from Marseille who liked to hum old folk songs while he cleaned his rifle. At 2:17 a.m., the man next to him heard footsteps in the trench, wet, sucking sounds, like bare feet moving through deep mud. He turned and saw nothing. When they checked Duval's post at relief, his rifle was still there, bayonet fixed, leaning perfectly against the parapet. His helmet sat balanced on top like a crown. His uniform, tunic, trousers, even his socks had been folded with military precision and placed neatly beside the boots, which stood upright on the duckboard, as if he had simply stepped out of them. Duval himself was gone. No blood, no struggle, no drag marks in the mud. The official report the next morning listed him as missing, presumed killed during enemy patrol activity. But every man in the section knew better, because around the exact spot where Duval vanished, someone or something had arranged a perfect circle of small white chalk stones pulled from the trench wall. Inside that circle lay 17 human teeth, fresh, roots still bloody. Grandfather wrote in the margin of the logbook, they were arranged in the shape of a smile. After Duval, the disappearances came faster. October 7th, 2 men gone from the same bay. October 9th, 3 more. Always the same signature, equipment left behind in perfect order, boots standing upright, uniforms folded, and always those circles of white stones, each one containing teeth or finger bones, or sometimes a single eye still glistening. The men started calling the things the Hollow Men, because that's what they began to see at first light, through trench periscopes or during stand-to. Tall, thin figures standing motionless in no man's land, wearing French uniforms that somehow never got muddy. Their faces were wrong, smooth depressions where features should be. No eyes, no mouth, just blank, chalk-colored skin, the exact same shade of the Somme mud after rain. Yet they moved like men. They waved sometimes. They stood at attention. Once, Grandfather swore he saw one of them salute. On October 12th, the worst thing happened so far. Private Thirard, one of the few survivors from the original section, woke up screaming in the dugout. He claimed he had seen himself standing at the end of the trench, smiling, beckoning him to come closer. I looked perfectly healthy, Girard whispered later. No trench foot, no lice. My uniform was clean, and the thing wearing my face, it knew things about my mother that only I knew. That same morning, when they counted boots, the number was short by 1. Girard was still there, but the men began avoiding him. They said his shadow didn't fall quite right in the weak sunlight. Lieutenant Rousseau, the company commander, finally gathered the remaining men, now down to 42, in the largest dugout. He admitted he had read the sector file when he took command. Reports went back to early 1915, when the first trenches were dug into the chalk of Hill 204. Local farmers before the war called the hill La Butte Creuse, the Hollow Hill. Old quarry tunnels and caves riddled the ground beneath it, some dating back to Roman times, maybe older. The locals said something had always lived down there, something that disliked men digging into its home. The army had developed a protocol, passed quietly from one commander to another. Never use artificial light after dark, it drew them. Never answer voices, they were learning how to speak like us. And every dawn, count the boots, because sometimes what walked back into the trench wearing a man's face wasn't the original man. And the strangest order of all, leave offerings. Every night at 2200 hours, a full ration of bread and bully beef had to be placed at the edge of the crater field, just beyond the wire. If we feed it, Rousseau said quietly, it takes fewer of us. Some men laughed bitterly, others just stared at the floor. Grandfather wrote in the margin, we weren't fighting the Germans anymore. We were paying rent to something that had claimed the hill long before any of us were born. By mid-October, the rain never stopped. The trenches turned into rivers of liquid chalk and filth, and the Hollow Men grew bolder. On October 17th, the entire section woke up to find every man's shadow missing. They could see each other clearly by the faint glow of the moon breaking through clouds, but when they looked at the trench walls, no shadows fell. It was as if the light simply passed through them or refused to acknowledge them. That same night, 3 soldiers walked calmly out into no man's land, smiling, calling back to their comrades that everything was fine, that their brothers were waiting. They never returned. 2 nights later, grandfather saw one of the hollow men up close for the first time. It was standing in the German wire, approximately 80 meters away, wearing the uniform of Private Girard, the man who had seen his own double. The thing looked perfect, clean-shaven, healthy. It even had Girard's slight limp from an old wound at Verdun. But when the moonlight hit its face directly, the features slid. For a moment, grandfather saw a smooth, featureless oval. Then Girard's face snapped back into place, smiling wider than any human mouth should allow. It raised a hand and waved, slowly, almost affectionately. Grandfather did not wave back. The last days of October were the worst. The disappearances stopped, but something far more disturbing began. Men started finding notes written in their own handwriting, describing things they had never done.